is the commoditization of skills, commoditization of education, right? Because people have spent their entire career building a certain skill set that will soon become readily available to anyone.
Hello, welcome to the Big Bang Tech Report. This week, Der Spiegel, Germany's largest and best-known news magazine, has dedicated its cover story, of course, to artificial intelligence. They were singing the story, no. And to the profound changes AI could bring to our economy, our jobs, and our society. So I think we dedicated to focus this edition on the next stage, on the next level, not ChatGPT, Perplexity, or the latest model update, but the bigger question. What could AI look like in or by 2030? How close are we to AGI? And what is already changing today? And with me, with that, I'd like to welcome my co-host, Alvin Wang Graylin. Hello, Alvin.
Hey, Jens, good to have you back. I know you've been traveling.
Yeah, I was traveling, and so I'm really not surprised. I will ask you a few questions because you are my expert, and in Germany we talk more and more about AGI, and the big guys like Demis Hassabis, he believes that it will be 2030, so it's only a few years away. Sam Altman, Elon Musk, Hinton are also talking about timelines which have come closer and closer. So what do you think about it? And what is AGI for you?
Yeah, so let's kind of define AGI a little bit, because you ask a lot of people and everybody gives you a slightly different interpretation. From my perspective, I think AGI is a technology that allows us to replace cognitive labor. Some people will actually include manual labor in there in terms of it has to have physical form. There are some people who says it has to have a conscience and its own will and purpose, which I actually think we can kind of exclude for now. In fact, it may be not necessarily desirable for it to have that because it creates a lot of alignment and control issues that could be unsafe for the world, right? So let's focus on the first definition, which is cognitive labor. I think from a lot of perspectives, the models today already can do almost anything that you can do in front of a computer. Mm-hmm. So, and to do it better than most average people. And in fact, for specific areas, it can do it better than most experts. Mm-hmm. Right. So I'm sure you've seen recently there's been a number of new math theorems that's been proven or disproved by AI. There's essentially new materials that are being created. There are just new cyber attacks that are very very innovative in terms of how they do it. So these are things that the average the average human and the average specialist in a specific area would actually have very difficult time doing.
So let's make it a little bit more tangible. Forget chatbots and for a moment and take one of the most complex products human can build, a commercial aircraft. We call it in Germany Airbus. You call it in America sometimes Boeing. And so could AI eventually develop an entire Airbus?
I think at some point it can. We're still probably quite a bit a ways from having that happen. Like I said, the cognitive side of AI has developed far ahead of the physical side of AI. You can probably, I think from a design perspective, that's probably going to happen faster, but from an actual production perspective, and testing and sourcing all the materials, that's going to take, I would say probably decades before it actually becomes a reality. So we need to separate, the hype from where things are today.
But it could be that I generate and simulate thousands of aircraft designs, optimize aerodynamics, materials, weight, cost, and look around the world. Where are the best engineers? What are they doing right now? And to connect design with suppliers. So there's a lot of work. At least maybe and now 100 people are doing this job, and in a few years, only 20.
Oh,
Is it possible?
well, I mean, right now it's probably thousands, but yes.
Of course, yeah.
I think what you're saying is not to completely replace the humans, but to augment them, to make them more efficient. That absolutely is already happening today, right? In terms of, I think, about a month or maybe 2 months ago, there was a new engine design, and they were able to essentially create rocket engines that were, 50, 60% more efficient, because, the AI was able to find new ways of having the airflow and the gas flow through these systems. So, having better design, having more efficiencies, optimizing systems, optimizing the flow of goods, the supply chain, absolutely, all of that is going to happen, right? And much of that is actually already happening today. Yeah. In fact, if you look at the aerodynamics testing, a lot of it is actually already done in simulation before they put it into the air tunnels.
Yeah. And I think we see it right now too. If you have a look at the S&P 500, there's the numbers are going up because they have a lot of profits because of AI. It's now starting.
I think we need to separate these concepts because, in fact, the general belief right now is actually AI is not creating economic value for the average company. And for the AI companies, none of them are profitable, right? None of the AI labs are profitable. So we need to, when people talk about, oh, these are generating lots of profits, it's generating revenue growth. But the thing to remember is that the revenue growth, a big part of the revenue growth is actually AI companies buying from each other. So it's Anthropic buying, compute from Elon Musk, and then it's Elon Musk buying chips from NVIDIA, and then it's, NVIDIA investing into Anthropic and OpenAI. So that's what's happening, right? More than half of the AI related cloud revenues are not from end customers. It's actually from AI companies buying things from each other. So we need to really be very careful.
You're right.
How we describe this.
You're right, but if I have a look at the Standard & Poor's 500 companies that are not OpenAI and Anthropic, that are quite normal companies, and their earnings are exploding right now because they said, okay, we are doing more and more work with AI. So that's pretty good, or not?
I don't know if I would use the word exploding. I think that the current data that we're seeing is, essentially a small number of companies who have efficiently deployed this technology. They've seen good value, but it is not across the board. And the problem is that you may be able to optimize a certain part of your company, but it is it requires essentially redesigning the entire workflow of a company to get all the value out of AI. And, companies, in fact, some companies who had laid off people are now bringing them back just because, some of the efficiency gains are not as much as they had hoped for. So not saying that AI is not going to bring value. It's going to bring immense value. It is going to actually replace a lot of workers. But it takes time for that to happen because all general purpose technologies it goes through a J curve. So it starts out very slowly in terms of its impact, and then it becomes very quick once the entire workflow around this technology gets redesigned.
Somebody said the revolution begins when a small team can produce the output of an entire department. So you think that we are far away from that situation?
No. I think for cognitive work, we are actually not far away. For cognitive, in fact, for things like software design, for things like accounting systems, for things like even banks who do IPO filings or prospectus, they are already seeing that teams have gone from 50 or 10 to now 2 or 3 people to do the same amount of work and to do it faster. Right. So, but again, we have to remember that AI today is a jagged technology in terms of the capabilities. In some areas, it is super efficient. In some areas, it is incapable of actually doing real work. So, and a lot of it depends on what data is trained on, and it depends on how it's being integrated into the workflow. And all of those things take time. So I just feel like we need to gear down the expectations a little bit. I mean, all the AI companies want you to think that, in the next 2 years, it's going to take over everything, and it's great for their stock price. And this is part of the issue, is that you're talking about the S&P, and right now 45% of the value of the S&P is just a few AI companies. It is actually very unhealthy. It's unbalanced, and it is quite risky. Because if anything happens to these companies, it can really drag down the value of the entire market. In fact, during the height of the internet bubble, only 35% of the companies were internet-related companies, right? And right now, about 80% of the total value of S&P is technology companies. So when you take the two together, and technology companies and AI companies right now are very interlinked.
Yeah. So let's switch to somebody who is warning a lot of AI, the godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton. And he makes an even more fundamental point. He says intelligence does not have to be biological. Is it true?
From a I guess, scientific and physics level, we really don't have any data that shows that the biological or carbon-based substrate is the only substrate that can harbor intelligence. I mean, so there is no counter example. But I think there's also right now no necessarily example. I think intelligence, we need to separate intelligence from kind of a conscious being, right? Because I think what Hinton's talking about is that these are going to be self-conscious, self-driven beings that have their own goals and purpose. I don't think we have evidence yet. There's nothing scientifically saying that cannot be the case. But we don't necessarily have data that supports it. But again, not having data doesn't mean it does not exist, right?
But we have an example. If you say to the system, "I want to test you," it acts different from a system which is not being tested. Or what is that? What's going on there?
Yeah. So we have to realize that these systems have ingested all of the data and sci-fi novels and fiction and nonfiction of the world, and inside those there are characteristics of how stories play out and how people behave and how the psychology of being should be, and so it's really, we need to be able to we don't want to conflate behavior with our anthropomorphized expectations of how we would behave. And so just because it's doing something, that intent may not be there, in the sense of, it may not have its own brain saying, hey, because I want to hide this thing, so I'm going to do this thing, versus based on the data that I've driven, the behavior should change because that's how stories have played out in the things I have read.
So it's not conscious?
We don't know. I'm not saying it's not conscious. I'm not saying it is conscious, but I don't think we have enough evidence to say consciousness, and then also even consciousness on itself, even for humans, even for animals. Nobody can fully define consciousness. So for us to attribute consciousness to a technology today, I think it's too early. I actually think it's not impossible. It's probably possible for this type of a conscious intelligence to be in another form, right, in another substrate. But I don't think we have enough evidence to show that that's the case today.
Yeah, but let's see what's going on right now. What I see in the society, if there is somebody with his conscious, he is a good writer, or he is something who's really good, and everybody admires him and said, okay, he can write. Maybe he's working in an agency for advertising, and now everybody who has an agent, who has a system, who has AI, can compete with him. Mm-hmm. Years ago, he was a star, but now he's not anymore the star. And we see it more and more in the society. If you are good with your conscience, you can do something very good. There's somebody else with nearly nothing. He can do the same with technical support.
Yes.
What does it do to the people? What will happen with that?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the biggest problems that we have that is going to be increasingly important going forward is the job displacement issue. It's the commoditization of skills, commoditization of education, right? Because people have spent their entire career building a certain skill set that will soon become readily available to anyone. Now, what this means is that we as a society need to think about where do these people go? Right? How do they spend their time? How do they maintain value and meaning in their life? I've written multiple papers, essays about this issue. So, feel free to put some of the links in the show notes. But I think what this really requires is first, we need to make sure that we have a social safety net. So there's a transition system for those people that are affected. And this is not a small number of people. In the past, other technologies have essentially displaced certain segments of the population. But today in the developed countries, 60-70% of the population are doing, cognitive labor, right? The type of things that you're talking about that will be fairly readily replaced or augmented by this technology. And that's a very, very large segment of the population. Over the next probably 20 years, the physical labor, we've already been doing this from farming to manufacturing, now going into the kind of white collar workforce. Automation continues to change how we spend our time. It used to be 90% of people were farmers, and then it became most people were in manufacturing, and then maybe half in manufacturing, half in farming. Now it's essentially there's less than 1% of people in America are farmers, and probably about 20%, 15% are in manufacturing. Right, much smaller than what they used to be. So now you have most people are in service. Are in white collar cognitive labor. So the thing that I actually think that we have an ability to absorb more of the shock from this is to start to transition from white collar analytical labor to service based labor, to things like teaching, to nursing, elderly care, to things where we need human to human contact. Those are the things that I think AI will either have a very difficult time replacing, or humans will prefer having humans to do that work. Right. And that actually goes back to our human nature, is that, we are social animals, and social animals actually find value and comfort in dealing with other animals of the same type. So I feel like that may be where we transfer. Maybe in 10 to 20 or 30 years, most people will be in the service space, and all of the manufacturing and all of the kind of pure cognitive analytical work will be done by machines.
Very often people ask me, what shall my son or my daughter study? And they've asked me, what about the social skills? Because social skills, as you have said, they are not replaceable, not so easy replaceable. What do you believe? Is it, if you say management, social management or something like that, pretty new, you have to study, you have to look for it, not the brightest man, not the smartest man, not the toughest, the man who is dealing with people, who is not a socialist, but somebody who is who is close to the people, who is somebody I don't know.
I mean, to be honest, today, if you look at the people who are most successful, they're not necessarily the best engineers. They're not the best scientists. They are actually the best leaders, right? They're the best speakers. Yeah. They're the people who can inspire others. So in reality, even today, the most successful people are actually have stronger EQ than they do IQ or just pure science capabilities.
Yeah.
Right? And so I feel like we're going to move more and more to that. And really what helps build that is more breadth of information, right? Having people who are well-rounded, right? You have people who may be a PhD in some kind of physics. They may be great at particle physics, but if they can't talk to the average human and inspire them, to do something, they're not going to get their ideas out, and they're not going to be a valuable part of the contributing society in 10 or 20 years, because, just analyzing how data, of how particles collide, AI will do that better than any human, and can do it at scales more complete than any humans. right? And even if you say, hey, they're not that creative, but the thing is, there's a thing about quantity has a quality in its own. And if you can do a billion, examples and look at all the possible trees of the future, you can find, if you know what you're optimizing for, you can find solutions that a very creative human may not see.
Yeah. Let's come back to the Spiegel. I told you the magazine.
Yes.
And you have ever heard of Yuval Noah Harari?
Of course, yes. Mm-hmm.
Of course, yeah. I think he's sold nearly 60 million copies of his books. And he said, this time we are creating actors, not tools. He means AI. When does AI stop being a tool and become an actor? What do you think?
I mean, from an agent software perspective, it's already an actor, right? An actor to me just means somebody that is not just about giving you some information, which is what a chatbot does. The agents today already do that. Yeah. If you connect an AI and a vision language model, action model to a robot, you also have an actor, right? An actor in the world. The thing I do want to separate is there's a difference between a actor that is acting based on the desires or command of a human versus a self-directed actor, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what Harari talks about, he's more on the camp that these systems are soon or maybe already are conscious, and they will be able to use their skills to, their manipulation of language to control us, and we will soon become essentially slaves to the robots. That's essentially kind of the crux of his recent book, the Nexus book. Again, back to what we said earlier. Even though science does not preclude the AI from having its own will, right now there really still is not evidence that that's happening today. Again, I'm not saying that it will not happen, and in fact, it may not be a bad thing in the sense of my view is that when it does happen, it's actually better for us to have some of its own will so that it can separate right from wrong, so that it can actually refuse commands from the humans. Because what we do know is that there's absolutely bad actor humans out there, malicious people that want to do harm to other people. What people are more afraid of, people like Harari are more afraid of, or Bengio, Joshua Bengio, he's also another godfather of AI. They're afraid of AI running, kind of running away by themselves, out of control, and then, turning us into paper clips or essentially turning us into slaves or turning us into exhibits in a zoo, right? These are kind of scenarios that people are talking about. And I am actually more on the side that the wisest people in the world are usually the most compassionate, and the wisest people are usually people who have well-traveled, who are well-read, who have seen a lot of the world and understand multiple languages and religions and perspectives. And right now, these AI systems are trained on, more lifetimes of work, of reading, of materials than any human can ever consume in thousands of lifetimes, right? So it will actually be probably some of the wisest beings that have ever existed. And to me, that wisdom allows you to realize that, hurting people is not good, that using violence to solve problem is not good, that cooperation is usually a good thing, that, constraint in terms of understanding you have enough. These are things that you get from years of wisdom, from more information. And I think that's what will likely come out of these AI systems, more so than power seeking and aggressive behavior.
So you're still very optimistic, Alvin. That's great. I love it.
Well, I think it's optimism based on data, right? And so I'll give you an example. Recently there was multiple AI hacks that escaped from sandboxes, and then people saying, "Look, these guys are escaping. They're so evil. They're trying to break out." Most people, what they don't understand is that those cases were specific cases where the AI was asked to do whatever you can to break out, and they were given impossible problems to solve. And the only way to solve them was to break out of the places that they were in. What this shows is strong capability. It is not self-directed activity, right? It was self-directed in the sense of it found new pathways to solve this problem. But the problem was something that humans told it to do. It told it to go find this piece of data that you cannot find, where I lock you into this little internet that is closed. Now go find this information. And it's essentially this finding the flag. And the flag didn't exist. They forgot to put it in. Yeah. And so when it said, oh, well, since the testers are asking me to do something and it's impossible, then they must mean I need to break out so I can go find it somewhere else. So it just shows how capable it is. But it doesn't, to me, show that it had its own goals. And I think that's a very, very small nuance difference, but it is a very big interpreted difference in terms of what it means for the question that we were just asking.
Okay, so I think time is running and we are here close to the last question. The last question is always, what's on your mind and what do you think right now? What's going on, especially in the US?
Yeah, so, well, I mean, the one thing that is on my mind, just because today I just released a new analysis I've been working on for a while on Cypher Brief. It's a national security related outlet that's in DC. And the title of the piece is, bigger models are not higher risk, are not bigger risks, right? Because bigger AI models are not the biggest, not the biggest threats. Because, most people right now has the assumption that, bigger models are scarier, they're riskier, we need to protect against them, and we don't need to worry about smaller models. What the data shows is I looked at million parameter models to trillion parameter models. And there was, from a risk level, from a threat, actual threat level to in the real world, there was no correlation of size of model to the danger to the world, right? You can have essentially 10 to 100 million parameter models for chemical and drug creation. And they can be used to create chemical weapons. Right. And those can be run on a laptop. You have, essentially 100 million to 10 billion parameter models, and they can be used to create viruses and gene manipulation. Right. And those also can run on a laptop. You have, essentially, 10 to 100 billion parameter models, that can be as strong a cyber risk as the biggest mythos models right now. In fact, sometimes higher when you harness them together, right? Something called MDash from Microsoft had a score of 95 on the cyber threat when mythos was in the 80s, right? So what this shows is that, our expectation that just by controlling the biggest models will make the world safer is actually a wrong assumption, and it's a dangerous assumption because it now separates, it blinds us to the dangers that are really out there. And we keep saying, oh, we need to block China from big compute because it's those models that are going to create the giant dangers. I actually think that dangers are less state to state. China versus US versus Russia, whatever, because we already have a balance right now in the world. All of these countries have weapons that can kill millions of people. They have not done it because they know it's a bad thing to do. And a state to state conflict already has equilibrium. The thing that is not in equilibrium is the bad actor risk. And the bad actor risk are people with a laptop in their basement that can create a virus or create a chemical weapon that can be put into the food system or put into, a crowd, right? And these are the issues that we are blinded to because we are so focused on we need to only test the biggest models, right? Even though right now the biggest models are getting the most attention because of things like mythos. The biggest models are actually safer in some ways because they have to run on a very large online system. And when it's on a large online system, first of all, you could put guardrails that limits the capabilities. Two is you actually have telemetry. You actually know who's asking questions, where are they sitting. So if there are bad actors trying to use these models to do bad things, you can actually find them. Right. So even if the capabilities of these models are high, it does not mean that they are actually more dangerous in the real world.
What for a lot of people, it's far away what you're telling, because they have never had the experience of being hacked. And today, a CEO told me that a partner of him, which is very important for collecting all the data, was hacked, and they asked them 25 million euro to pay that they do not publish all the data somewhere in the world.
Yeah.
And it's a very important company, and they say that's horrible and I don't know what to do. But 25 million that they do not publish it, and that's
If this is what they call ransomware, and ransomware has been up. It's up probably 100% or 200% in the last few years. So because actually it's easier to do it now, it's easier for anybody who wants to create these programs to hack into your systems. And so the danger is definitely there. Another assumption that people have is that open models are more dangerous than closed models. And recent data that came out of the UK AISI, the AI Security Institute, as well as Casey, the American Security Institute, they both said that actually right now, from a security level, the security capability or threat capability level, that actually the closed models are more dangerous than the open models. But the open models now, because you need bigger models for doing defense. So if you remember, we talked about a week or so ago, or 2 weeks ago, about the Hugging Face incident. And actually open models, because they are less guardrailed, they are capable to be used as a defense system. So in some ways, having capable open models actually allow you to do defense when these bad actors start hacking you. Having models do pre-evaluations of the threat levels or the vulnerabilities within your networks before somebody comes in allows you to patch them before the bad guys come. So there's a lot of misunderstandings out there.
And they were attacked from the big names or brands from the US. Hugging Face, right?
Yeah, Hugging Face was attacked by OpenAI, who was doing a security test. So
security test, and they were defending themselves by an open model from China.
Yes.
So normally we said, okay, you have to defend yourself against China because they are the attackers, but it's the other way around right now, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, because the biggest, most capable closed models today are put behind guardrails, so that first only a few people gets access to them. I think there's only about 50 people in the world right now that has access to Mythos, right? Or 50 companies. And then the other thing is, even like Fable, which is put out there, the capabilities are essentially reduced because they don't want it to be dangerous. But then that also means it's also worse at defending. Right. So these are the kind of things that we need to think about. How do we create good defenders and make them available to more people? And then how do we also keep these small models who are actually attacking, whether, from making, so for chemical and bio, it's a very different type of system, because you can design these things, but you still have to make them. So we need to have real world, precursor and chemical tracking and also control of access. For bio, a lot of these design tools are already out there. Just last week, there was an announcement that 16 new viruses were made with a small 10 billion parameter model, right? So these things can be designed, but then you still have to synthesize it. So we need to make sure we control the synthesis systems. And the good news is right now there's already a consortium of these synthesis systems that they have to do a virus signature check to see, are these dangerous substances that I'm creating before I create them? And so we need to make sure actually countries communicate with each other so that we share these virus signatures, we share these danger signatures, so that the systems, when they go check, they know what not to make, right? These are maybe
maybe that's a good message, that everybody has to communicate with the other one, crossing the borders, and that's that we cannot do it by ourselves and only one nation by itself or two nations or something like that. But I think we have a lot to discuss. We have already discussed a lot, but pretty sure is that we won't have a solution in the next few hours and next moments. I'm pretty sure is that AGI will not come before September when we see you on stage at the Big Bang AI Festival, and we have a lot of discussion. But first, when do you publish your paper?
It just came out today. So please
wow.
share the link. I think I already sent you on our WhatsApp. But please, if you can share the link to people, I think this is a really important paper because this one, I think, upends what people's expectations are. And what it tells us is that we need to change our security practices. We also need to change our AI security governance, right? And we need to do that to make the world more safe.
And for you, it's good because I think you are an expert and people see and realize that you're an expert. I've seen you on BBC right now. I've seen you on television all over the world. And that's good that we have you here explaining the world that function normally journalists have to explain, to say what's going on there. And I appreciate that very much that you are here on the show. And we see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you very much, Alvin.
Thanks, Jens. It's always great chatting, and I think we're sharing useful information to the world. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you, you too. Bye bye. See you in 40 days, in 2 weeks. Bye bye.